Welcome, everybody. Thank you for participating in this Zoom presentation. It's not one of my favorite ways to present. I like to see people's expressions and their body language and enthusiasm, but we'll have to do it. It's the way it is today. So I'm going to share just a tidbit of my knowledge today about habitat and wildlife. I always ask the audience, who's a habitat manager? And very few people they're reluctant to raise their hands, but we know everybody is. Whether we order somebody to mow your lawn or plant the landscape or, create a landscape, or whether you do it yourself, whatever we do on the land that involves the soil, whatever we put on that land changes and alters the habitat. And so we're all habitat managers. I'm going to draw today from my work experience. I've been working as a biologist since 1990 for DEEP. I worked 5 years before that for the Agricultural Experiment Station and research. And then I practice what I preach even in my personal life, and I'll be drawing from my own personal management of not only where we live, our 1.25 acre lot, but also a farm, charred oak tree farm that we own in Sprague, Connecticut, that we're managing for habitat. I always start my talk off with a positive note, and that is that bald eagles were, when I started working for DEEP, there was only one nesting pair up in the Barkhamsted Reservoir, 1992, I believe. And the only reason the bald eagle made it back and now has over 70 nests, or whatever, 65 to 70 nests in Connecticut, is because people took the determination that we're going to bring that bird back and we're going to clean up the environment, and it's going to happen. Enhancing habitat is a very similar thing. We have to understand what it takes, and then we have to have people that are going to say, I want to do something and I want to make a difference and I want to create a cleaner environment habitat-wise. And so today I'm going to draw upon and hopefully try to inspire action from you that in how you look at the landscape from a habitat perspective. Sessions Woods is where I work out of, and we have a 10-year plan that I've written that goes from 2011 to 2021, and that allows us to follow some criteria on how we're going to manage over the 10-year plan. There's 771 acres there, so we try to think out 10 years what we're going to do. The land that I own, my wife and I and family own, my kids, is out in Sprague, and that's a 40-acre area, and I'm going to draw from that as well, what we've done out there, some things. This is my family. I want to dedicate this particular presentation to my son, Neil, who's standing next to me. He passed away May 20th, and he was a ardent habitat manager, and it's been a real tough time without him here, but nonetheless, we all worked hard. We all work hard to manage habitats on our property. So two things are going to impact biological diversity on the land. The first one is direct habitat loss. You pave an area, you mow down an area, you change the habitat, you lose the habitat, you lose it, fragmented and lost. The second greatest threat will be invasive non-native species, plants and animals. I love Connecticut's landscape. I'm born and raised in Connecticut, and I love the beautiful fall foliage. This is up in Crescent Lake in Southington. I was enjoying a picnic dinner with my wife while the sun was going down, and I accidentally took this really beautiful picture of the foliage. You have to know what's in your toolbox if you're going to create a habitat. What kind of plants do you want to plant? What's in your toolbox to plant? In Connecticut, there's 2,800, and I'm rounding down, okay, 2,800 plants that make up our environment. The herbarium at UConn, I got this information from the Dr. Les Meerhoff. I know that about 1,800 are native to Connecticut of those 2,800. 1,800 were here pre-colonial settlement, and 1,000 were brought in by our ancestors, okay, by our previous people that have brought from Europe, Asia, all over the world into Connecticut. So 2,800 make up the plant base. 97 of those 1,000 non-natives are considered invasive, and they're invasive criteria. There's a criteria that makes them that puts them in that category, and it's scientifically done. And there's a committee now. It's sort of politically done as well, but mostly scientific. The criteria on how to add them to the invasive species list, and whether you ban them or not. It's scientific on whether that gets listed, but it's whether they ban them or not is by that committee. It's a government committee that is that put together. You can get that list online if you Google it, Connecticut invasive plant list, and I always have it with me when I'm anytime I'm buying plants, because you want to refer to that list. Never buy invasive plants and never plant them. We can't go forward without looking at the past. Connecticut was 75% pasture by 1810, and the significance for that, for me, is to say, when we denuded that landscape, we took away the biological diversity, so we erased it. And we had pockets of biological diversity within the wetlands and the stone walls and maybe the high peaks of Connecticut. But a lot of the biological diversity was removed. And then we did a lot of putting in exotics like the European mantis. Everybody thinks it's a great insect, but I've watched it kill off many, many butterflies off of my meadow. And I actually collect the eggs every year and I toss them out because they're not protected by law and they're not native to Connecticut. But that's besides the point. But the agricultural past of Connecticut, as witnessed by our state insect, it's still the European mantis. And someday we'll see that change maybe to a monarch or a tiger swallowtail, but that's going to take people to do that. But I always throw a little plug in for that every time I do a talk, because someday maybe some kid in the school might get the right idea to ask their legislator to change that state insect. The forest grew back, and the abandonment of our land brought back the forest and a lot of the plants. It's not the same as it was pre-Columbus, but pre-colonial period, but we have vegetation back on the land, and that's good for wildlife. The question for us is, we know the quantity, but are we starting to address the quality? Quality is just as important as quality. So with over 80% of the land being privately owned, it's important that the people that own the land determine the quality as well as the quantity. The future of our landscape is going to determine on the actions of people that own the land. The more you carve land into the forest, the closer bird droppings can fall into that forest, the more likely the invasive plants will spread. So depending on what's planted on the landscape and the proximity to those patches of forest is going to determine what's going to grow there. And then the direct action by people. Do they care about what they plant around their dwellings and around their properties, and then are they managing for the invasives? So animals need what people need: food, water, shelter, cover, space, and the arrangement of these four elements creates their environment. And we're going to talk today about cover and food sources, and then thickets and creating shelter and cover and food availability, and nesting opportunities and escape cover. But the arrangement is just as important as what it is. Thickets are important. If you don't have thickets next to an area, if you don't have thickets, you're not going to have nesting opportunities, predator avoidance. Thickets are very important for animals to rest and to hide and to nest and to provide that predator cover that they need, as well as thermal cover. Space is also important. A robin only needs 3 to 5 acres. Anytime you bulldoze an acre land and you put a new house in, or a new development, or a new library, whatever, robins like disturbance. So robins aren't going to be as affected when they're breeding, because they'll occupy those areas very readily. On the other hand, a bird like the wood thrush needs 30 to 50 acres of 10-inch or bigger trees, maturing woods, to create the environment for breeding and raising their young. And that's on the minimum size, 30 to 50. Both of these animals are cousins. They're in the thrush family. I remind people that even though your lot may be an acre, 2 acres, or quarter acre, during migration, the wood thrushes and the robins will migrate together, and you'll find them foraging in these smaller lots. And then during the breeding season, they go into their breeding habitats, and the wood thrush might pick the bigger areas. But during migration, you'd be amazed at what's stopping in these little lots and picking up food. So it's important to consider, no matter whether you're in a big area or small, that native plants are important to have in all those areas, small and large. Turkeys need 4 square miles. They don't migrate, so they're going to use whatever's within 4 square miles. They're going to walk most of that area, and they're going to fly a little bit of it, but they're going to mostly walk. And having spring, summer, fall, and winter food sources throughout the seasons, creates their environment, and they have adapted to finding those things within 4 square miles. And your property may be within those 4 square miles. What I'd like to do for you, and I'll give you examples at Sessions Woods. We've used scientifically guided methods to create habitat, to create biologically diverse environments there. And we also like to educate people there. So if you visit, you'll see those exhibits, and you'll read about it. You can come in. When we open the building, you can go back in the building, but right now you can still walk the grounds and read the signage. And then, you could recreate there. You could bird watch. You could, walk, hike, enjoy those areas, and it's interpreted for you. This is the building, what it looked like in 1992 before we moved in. And, we also have a 2.5 mile trail and a 1/2 mile trail, and then several little trails. We also have the Tungus Trail that goes around the property as well, through the property. You always want to ask yourself, when you're thinking about habitat, what is a limiting factor for animals? Is it food? Are there spring, summer, fall, and winter foods available for wildlife on my property? Is there cover available? Is there nesting cover, escape cover, winter cover? Is there thickets? Are there thickets that can provide that kind of environment? And also, am I making a space for wildlife? Am I just mowing everything down and making a big lawn, or am I creating islands of habitat and ecotones where there's changes between the tall trees and the lawn, where it's soft rather than abrupt? So am I providing space? Am I providing a patch of milkweed for monarch butterflies? So you want to consider all these things that create habitat. And then you also want to ask yourself, are there any of these 97 invasives on my land that are causing disturbances to the habitat? Are they displacing disproportionately the environment so that the native plants can't grow? I want to share with you a study that the University of Delaware did through Doug Tallamy's work, in case you have a doubt that invaded sites are better than native sites, or native sites are better than invaded. They found that when they researched and looked at caterpillar species on invaded sites versus native sites, they found that there was a lot fewer caterpillar species on invaded sites, where there was a lot of invasions of non-native plants. And there were not only a biomass, there was 23.9 times less caterpillar biomass and 13.5% less caterpillars than the native sites. And as we know, caterpillars feed the birds. They feed the wildlife. And so the more biologically diverse with native plants, the better the site is. And that study, did a good job of showing that the invaded sites are less. So if you remove the invasives, allow more natives, you will improve it for caterpillar species, and then wildlife can feed on those, and biological diversity can increase. You want to have a variety of food and cover sources within the seasons of the year. And I try to emphasize spring through winter, and you want to have a variety of food and cover value plants throughout the seasons of the year. Some examples for you, people throw bird in a bird feeder and they think they're going to help wildlife. Well, I plant Helianthus instead, and that provides natural native sunflowers. It's perennial. It regrows every year. You don't have to worry about filling a feeder. That's one of the 3 native Helianthuses. Looks just like a black oil sunflower. The American pokeweed, right through the window in our offices, we could see them growing. And things like the catbird in the fall comes in to fatten up before its spring migration. These birds migrate thousands of miles, and they need to fuel up during the fall period to make it to their migration. And so it's important to provide a variety of food sources. Here's the range map of here's Connecticut, and look at where the range of where they winter in the blue here. It's dramatic. And the more variety of food sources, the more likelihood they're going to make it down to their migrations. Planting things that have winter persistence, like the red chokeberry, is important. And it provides, red and black chokeberry provides food sources. You also want to provide summer food, and this is shad bush, for example. I have a video that I took in front of the building of a cedar waxwing feeding its young. Juneberry or shad bush, Amelanchier ripens. It's one of the first ones in the spring to ripen. So by June, in June it is also known as Juneberry as a common name. It's already ripening. So you want to provide berry production throughout the seasons. Bayberry, on the other hand, northern bayberry is more of a fall food. And you could witness a fall migration in front of our building every fall, starting in late September, early October. And I took this little video showing the yellow rump warblers zipping in and out of this patch of bayberry. It's a dry site, and it's perfect for the bayberry to grow there. And the berries are eaten regularly, and it's like clockwork in the fall when you see them coming in feeding on these bayberry berries, and it becomes predictable. Another winter food source that you would consider on the land, and this one is one of my favorite videos I took right next to my computer. It's from my office. You can see this robin chipping away at the winter food, this winter berry. And I always, this one really shows you the hardship that wildlife go through in the winter. We have the luxury of going to our refrigerator or cooking up our food. These animals have to chip through ice sometimes to get their food. This is, the more varieties of food you make available, the more likelihood you will provide a sustainable food source. Okay. Another video I took right in front of the building during the winter without snow. Here's a flock of robins feeding on the winterberry, and the female produces the berries on the winterberry. But here you'll see cedar waxwings as well. See them right here, feeding on them. And those same cedar waxwings are feeding on the shad bush in the summer, and they're here in the winter now feeding on the winterberry. So it's important to recognize that sustainability over the landscape, the variety of foods that you could provide. Another morning, I watched a bluebird out of my window while I was writing a report or something on the computer. Bluebird feeding on the winterberry right outside my window. That I planted those back in the middle 90s, right outside the window there. Red mulberry is another favorite of mine. This is the food habits literature, and you can see robins and wood thrushes both feed on them, but you got scarlet tanagers, just a wide variety of birds feed on. And to my surprise, turtles love them as well. When they land on the ground, they feed on the the berries that are on the ground. So a variety of food sources. This is another summer food. By end of June, they start ripening. Some people will ask, why are native berries more important than exotic berries? Well, research out of University of Rhode Island showed that there's better fuel sources, 50%, good fat inside the northern bayberry. Our native berries are very nutritious for fueling up for our birds and our animals. So native berries are more valuable and sustainable for our wildlife. So indigenous plants are better. They're adapted to the soil and the climate. They've co-evolved. Wildlife and plants are inextricably linked. In other words, there's an adaptation. They've learned over eons to utilize that resource. We as humans like to create landscapes. We are into art, right? Art and science. Landscape is an art and a science. We like to make shapes. We like to plant things. Unfortunately, we don't sometimes think about science as strongly as we should. Like biological diversity needs plant diversity. So if you have low plant diversity, you have low wildlife diversity. If you plant only one kind of monoculture of things, diseases could affect the monoculture and then you lose everything. Biological diversity gives you diverse plants, animals. Diseases is less likely to destroy an entire patch if you have a variety of species. And I like to make sure that people think about diversity. Like instead of planting a hedgerow of hemlocks, plant 5 or 6 different evergreens. Like the woolly adelgid came in and affected our eastern hemlock. Well, if you had 100% hemlock in a row, you're going to lose the whole hedge. So you're going to have to replace the whole hedge or treat the whole hedge. But say you have an informal hedge of different kinds of evergreens, a disease hits, you're not going to lose the whole hedge. Evergreens are important as an early nester for the mourning dove. In the winter, starting in February, you hear these guys cooing. You hear them cooing, and they're breeding already in early spring, almost. Right, winter's not even over. They can exude a crop milk from their neck, from their throat, their crop, and they can feed their young early. So they pick their nest early in the season in the evergreen patches. So just as a little microhabitat, mourning doves, if you add evergreens to your neighborhood, look for those mourning doves early nesters because they'll nest in those early evergreens because the deciduous trees don't provide the cover the evergreens do in the early part of the season. Anytime you could add evergreen to an environment, you add biological diversity, structural and winter cover, thermal cover, predator cover. Everybody's backyard, if you had a patch of evergreens, you could watch the cardinals roost at night. You could even at times, if you're in the right area of Connecticut, you might see the saw-whet owl roosting in these evergreens with little microhabitat. Evergreens are the minority of the forest. There's only less than 10% of our woods is evergreen. So anytime you add an evergreen component, you've added a good, habitat component that's in a minority. That little saw-whet owl is sitting in this red cedar right here. And it spent its night hunting for mice, and then it would roost at night inside this evergreen and eat the mice that it hunt during the day and eat the mice that it hunted during the night. These deciduous trees are taking away from the habitat. They're starting to overcrowd the pioneer cedar, the red cedar. So we actually take action against the competition. So we might clear out the competition to allow the evergreens to get thicker and fuller. It's a strategy you might want to do on your property. If you have evergreens, you want to daylight them and allow them to get thick and provide winter cover, nesting cover. Now, this is a real busy slide. Please don't get too caught up in it. Carrying capacity There's many things that affect carrying capacity. What is carrying capacity? It's the average number of animals that live in an area from season to season. We as humans affect all of these factors, but the biggest control we have is the habitat, the quality and the quantity. If I had a 5-gallon pail, I could only put 5 gallons in it. If I increase the size of the pail, I could put 6 gallons in it. Habitat works the same way. If you want to have increased species of wildlife, if you want to have monarchs in your backyard nesting, laying eggs and raising caterpillars, you got to have a patch of milkweed. You can improve the quantity and quality of your yard by adding milkweed for monarchs. Whatever species you pick, you could increase nesting mourning doves if you plant evergreens for them, or you could have stopover birds feeding on berries during the winter if you plant things like winterberry or chokeberry. So you have the opportunity to increase carrying capacity by improving the quality and quantity of habitat. You could also put food in a box, but that doesn't address the cover and the sustainability of your landscape. So planting native plants improves the quality and quantity of your area. And that's the magic behind habitat management. That's to improve the quality and quantity of plants. And that will then increase the number of animals. You want to see hummingbirds on your property, plant Lonicera sempervirens, which is a native tubular vine, nectar sources. You could put a hummingbird feeder up, but it's temporary. You want to sustainably do it. What if you go on vacation and you're not sustaining it? Plant things for the hummingbird. Invasives are what I call the cancer of the landscape. They were brought in during and after European settlement. They spread around. They displaced the native plants. Whenever you put an invasive into an environment, it's like having a mole on your skin. The mole sits there as part of one of the billions of cells you have. If it stays there, you're only going to displace a few cells. If it starts metastasizing, you might lose your whole arm. So invasives work the same way. They displace native plants. They displace the good cells. They degrade the habitats. Native plants like highbush blueberry, on the other hand, are good, and they sustain the landscape. They're beautiful. They not only color the landscape, but they provide food. The invasives, on the other hand, are little tumors on the landscape. Here's an aerial of Sessions Woods. We have 13 invasives that make up our landscape, and we have a plan on attacking all of them, how to reduce them and knock them out. So within the plan, I describe where they are, how we manage them, and what we did to manage them. You should do that for your own land, whether it's a 10 by 10 foot area or whether it's an acre lot, half acre, 10 acre, 100 acres, 1,000 acres, whatever it is. You want to identify where your invasives are. This curve is a little busy, but this is the time axis here, and this is the abundance and time. If you kill something when it's in its young state, in its early abundance, right, when it's a few, okay, early in time, you can prevent it from becoming exponentially growing. A lot of times people take action when there's a ton of the stuff around. If you could identify invasives, you have one stalk of Japanese knotweed, or you have one autumn olive on your property. If you get it early, you won't have 1,000 of them. So action should be early. If you can learn to identify them, you should attack them early. Once they're up here, they cost a lot of time and money. And we end up taking action up here most of the time because for whatever reason, that's when people notice it. Like mugwort. Mugwort, you might have one stalk. You say, it's not that much. And then it grows 32 feet in a year laterally. So imagine what a field's going to look like in 3 or 4 years. So take action down here. So here's an example. Here's Route 69. I was driving in one day to the facility and I found this patch of weird looking green grass. So I went over, I looked at it. Whoa, that's Japanese stilt grass. So I pulled it out. Now I prevented this kind of invasion. This is the whole understory has been invaded. It's an annual that can take over and become tremendously invasive. So I try to get it early if you can. And you can pull it out. It's an annual, so you can, mow it down, pull it out. You can, because it's an annual, you could actually use an organic herbicide on that if you wanted to, like vinegar. But it's not perennial. I don't advise it vinegar for perennials, but for an annual, you could use concentrated vinegar. We at Sessions Woods and on state land are replacing our non-native grasses with native grasses wherever we can, wherever it's feasible. Why? Because it makes more sense. We will take our fields and we'll put in little blue stem. Why do we put little blue stem in? Little blue stem is a bunch grass. It provides, habitat. Now these turkeys are stripping the little fluffy seeds from the little blue stem grass and they're filling their crop. I took this video once, and you can see where I wrote here, wild turkeys hunting. I had no idea what they were doing until I really paid close attention. They're actually stripping that really fluffy seed off of the little blue stem. Little blue stem provides a neat habitat for wildlife. It's a bunch grass. It's not only aesthetic, but it's also very valuable. You can plant big blue stem, which is I call turkey foot. You can plant things like switchgrass. You can see the nooks and crannies in between here. Or you can plant things like deer tongue grass. I like it. It looks like a deer tongue. It gets variegated in the fall. I never saw anything eat the seeds until one season. I was in the winter. I was walking by a patch, and I watched this junco climb up. I had this little Fujifilm camera on that I was using at the time, and I watched it climb up. And you'll see it eat the little seeds, little millet seeds up there. You go into a field and you see a bunch of birds fly out. You're like, whoa, what are they doing in there? They're eating stuff. They're finding cover. But native plants, they've been doing it for thousands of years. And they have adapted to these plants. Very valuable for their existence. So if you don't mow them down and you let them go to seed, you can provide lots of different food and cover for wildlife. Native grasses, I encourage you to plant native grasses in with your fields, edges, fields. And then try not to be one of the ones that add to this 382,000 acres every year that have been converted to lawn. It's amazing how much time and energy we spend doing that. I'm not against lawns. I'm just against a lawn that you don't need. Like if it's too big, it's, when the kids are little, you go out, you play soccer with them or playing ball, you need more space. That's one thing, but what if you take a 10 by 10 area, 10 foot by 10 foot, and make it a monarch habitat, monarch butterfly habitat, or a whatever you pick, whatever species, whatever you want to encourage. But reduce that lawn and plant the native species there. This was a video. This was a picture I took at Hammonasset one fall. My wife and I were reading a book, and wind was blowing really hard. The sun was going down at Hammonasset, and I looked over back to the truck, and I saw a bunch of, literally hundreds and hundreds of monarchs flying by and landing in these evergreens, and I couldn't believe I was in Connecticut. I thought that only happened in Mexico. Well, anyway, they were staging themselves along the shore, and they were moving on. But that year was prolific. I happened to be at the right place at the right time. You could see them. I wish I had taken videos, but I don't have videos from that day. Unfortunately, I didn't know how to use my video then. But it was a sight to see. People will plant nectar sources for butterflies, like butterfly bush, non-native. That's not going to help the monarch. All it's going to do is like you stopping at 7-Eleven and buying a big gulp and gulping it down. It's not going to help you for nutrition. It's not going to give you your vitamin A, B, D, whatever you need. It's going to, not D, that's sunshine, but it's not going to give you your healthy vitamins because it's nectar. Nectar is going to just provide sugar. Okay. They're not going to provide any larval foods, but everybody's excited about planting a buddleia. If they were only a little more excited to plant things like milkweed, that actually is what they need to survive. What what's going to be the answer to increasing monarch butterflies is planting its larval foods. So you can plant a variety of wildflowers, but you really need to think about planting not just nectar sources. Here's a variety of wildflowers that provide a variety of nectar, but also larval foods. This is a viceroy here with this line on the wings here, just so you can differentiate it. But there's a variety of, this is a meadow in Sprague that my wife and kids restored and enhanced. It's amazing in the summer what we witnessed there for butterfly populations. It used to be an old cornfield with a lot of autumn olive and bittersweet, and we changed and transformed it into a biologically diverse meadow with dozens and dozens of wildflowers, native grasses. I enjoy watching this bumblebee mimic, this snowberry sphinx moth. It's an awesome sphinx moth that I see regularly out in my fields. Milkweed is the answer for the monarch. So whenever you could plant it and create patches, small or large, you're going to help improve the population. And as we know, it's a concern nationwide how it's been declining. And people can have direct positive action by planting even one plant, but plant a patch, and you'll be very surprised at how much you can contribute to the well-being of monarchs. This is a little risque slide. I'll cover it over for you. This is I took this photo on my land, our land, my family, me and my family's land. And one day I asked my kids if they would help me catalog some butterflies, catch them and ID them in the fall, like towards the end of the summer. And one of my sons says, "Hey Dad, check this out. This one looks deformed. What's going on?" Right? So we all run over there, we look, and it's these monarchs are breeding. And we all got a chuckle out of it. But the message for that day was, remember when we planted those seeds, those milkweed seeds when it was bare ground? All those milkweed plants now are breeding grounds for the monarch. And there was the witness. We're witnessing the breeding right there on our land. And it's really rewarding when we could see the success. And you can see that as well if you plant milkweed. Asclepiases. Nectar's valuable too, and during migration, nectar's important. And the goldenrods are the #1 nectar source during migration. So before you cut all your goldenrods down and think that they're your allergy producer, think about leaving some goldenrods. Goldenrods are the #1 nectar source during migration. So keep that in mind when you're managing your landscapes. Goldenrods are important for fall migration. They don't cause allergies because they're insect pollinated. They're not wind pollinated. So, you can still be allergic to it, but it's not the main cause of allergies. The ragweed is, not the goldenrods. Fall migration foods are important. This spice bush butterfly and its egg, its caterpillar. I always get intrigued at this vestigial tongue that it has. It looks like a bird dropping. It looks like a bird dropping, and this one looks like a snake with the big eyes. It's a neat plant. It curls a leaf and hides in here during the day, and then forages on the leaves. Really cool, cool insect. But it needs the spice bush to lay its eggs. We've collected seed on our property. We knocked out 12 acres of understory of barberry that was destroying the biological diversity of our forest on our land, Charter Oak Tree Farm. So we killed all the barberry, and then we collected seeds from our native spice bush, and then we had it contract grown, and then we brought it back as little seedlings. And some we had to protect with shelters. But restoring the land, getting rid of an invasive, but then restoring the land is very important. That was one of the species we restored the land with. We also used things like maple leaf viburnum and high bush blueberry, huckleberry, things like that. A good plant instead of buddleia, instead of that butterfly bush that everybody likes, is sweet pepper bush. You could smell this about 100 feet away, and it's a wicked attractant for butterflies. Butterflies love, and pollinators, other pollinators, bees. So consider all of the different seasons of the year when you're looking at habitat. You don't want to just plant monocultures. You want to plant a variety of food sources. You want to plant different berry producing plants, different cover, evergreen cover. When you plant a meadow, you want to have a different flowering during different times of the year. You want to have a variety, and then a variety of larval foods for the different caterpillars, different butterflies. So I want you to ask yourself this before you start selecting a plant. What is the habitat significance of the plant that you want to put in? Is it just for aesthetics, or is it for monarch butterflies, or is it for winter cover, winter food, fall food, summer food? Why are you planting this plant? Is it only for you, or is it also for wildlife? And what is that habitat significance of the plant? And then, is it a non-native plant? Is it one of the invasives, the 96, 97 invasives? So what you do first is you want to make a little plan. Make a little plan of your property. You want to have a sketch of the area that you manage, okay? It doesn't have to be your own. You could get permission to do it, okay? But this is rectangular, it could be circle, whatever. But you want to make an inventory of what you have. So with today's apps on the phone and, guidebooks, you could get pretty good at identifying plants, especially the woody plants. So you put little circles on where they are, depending on the crown, how big their crown is, and then you list what they are. Then the little red dots, you want to put them in too, because you want to list where the invasives are. Because invasives are tumors on the landscape, and you're going to have to figure out how to get rid of them and minimize their impact on the land. Okay? So make a simple plan and put it on your refrigerator and look at it every day. One year you might say, well, I'm going to take care of this bittersweet over here that's growing in this field. Rip it out. Or this winged euonymus that's growing in the understory over here, or a climbing vine, or autumn olive, or whatever it is. And then you might want to plant this edge where the field and the forest meet, and you can plant a variety of native plants. You could then add another garden with monarch larval foods like the milkweeds. You could add another patch of summer foods. You could do a variety of things, reducing the lawn around your house. You could add hummingbird-liking plants if you want to see the hummingbirds, add a trellis. The sky's the limit on what you could do. Every square inch on this property can either become an invasive plant or it could be a native plant. It's going to depend on what you want to do. The footprint that you allow invasives to take is going to be up to what you decide and how much energy and enthusiasm you have. So plants make up habitat. The more diverse the plants, the more diverse the habitat, the more diverse the species. So here's some action items for you. Observe nature. I found that just observing nature can give you clues to what you want to put there. Go on an edge of your yard and look around. Walk around your property. See what's already there. You might have already a lot of native plants that all you got to do is give them some space. Clip out the invasive and boom, they take off. But what's growing there usually, especially if it's greater than 5 years old, the plant, it probably likes the condition that area provides. But make sure it's one of the native 1,800, one of the native plants. and learn to predict that seasonal plant and animal interaction. Just like I showed you for Sessions Woods, that cedar waxwing feeding its young in the summer, and then then feeding on the winterberry in the winter. You could learn to predict on your own property after you made these plantings. You could start predicting how those areas are utilized by wildlife. Catbirds come in and they nest in a thicket. There's a nice gray dogwood that's clonal that in front of my office window that for several years a gray catbird is nested in it. You can learn to predict that because you create that thicket environment. But the more you get involved in habitat management, the more variety of plants that you put in, and you're watching and looking and learning, you'll create a better environment. Diversify the plantings on your property. In other words, if you have only 5 species of trees, add some trees, add some shrubs, if you got a monoculture of lawn, add some wildflowers. Create a diversity of plantings, not a monoculture, okay? Don't plant monocultures. And try to detect invasives before they become a big problem. The earlier you detect, the better off you are, the less energy you got to spend. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Ben Franklin said that. And it's true with invasives. You got one vine of bittersweet, you get it out of there. I like to cut it and then paint it with brush begone so that the stem doesn't resprout. If you rip it out of the ground, the orange roots will grow back. They'll grow back to more. So I like to cut it with a lopper and then paint the stem with brush begone. It's a selective use of an herbicide, but it kills the roots. But early detect and then knock them out. And make notes of where they are. Like, that map, very simple map of your property. If you're good with GPS it, but locate it, flag it, and then start managing against them. Manage invasives using mechanical, chemical, and biological. Okay, so you can mechanically remove, you can chemically remove, or you could biologically. Biologically means you could go, you can't really buy them on the market, but like for purple loosestrife, you could buy you get the beetles, which UConn used to do. They used to give them out. It's not as readily available anymore, but in the future, who knows? But mechanical and chemical are the 2 techniques I use. You can mechanically remove, or you could judiciously use chemical, either you could use organic or, non-organic methods, whatever you think, try it. If it works, do what works for you and use them judiciously and by the label. And then decrease by preventing the planting of invasives. If you don't plant it, you prevented it from growing there, right? So whenever you select anything, don't plant on natives because you'll regret it. One tree of heaven will, create hundreds of thousands of seeds. You don't want to plant that on your property. You don't want to plant a purple loosestrife that can be hundreds of thousands of seeds in one season. You don't want to plant anything that is on that 97, of the 97 invasives. So if you don't want to use herbicides and you don't want to, you're squeamish about using herbicides, at least don't let it go to seed. Try not let that plant, that invasive, go to seed. If you want to tolerate it there, but at least knock out the seed. So lop it down, lop it off, put the seeds in the garbage bag and throw it in the garbage. Don't let it go to seed. Increase the native plants. And you do it by looking at the seasons of the year. Okay, I hope that my presentation has given you a taste of what you could do for your land, what you manage, whether you own it or whether you allowed to manage it. You don't have to own it. You can just get permission to manage it. There's 3 million people live in Connecticut. There's 3 million acres. If you plant even one plant, you've made a difference for wildlife. I can't imagine any other way to have instant results, and that's by planting a native plant on the land. You can literally make an impact the second you did that. Or the second you pulled out an invasive, you've had an impact, positive. So I'm going to leave you with two things before the end of my talk. One is this thing called paralysis by analysis. That's where you analyze things too much. You look at your land, oh man, it's overwhelming. There's too many invasives. This area is too big, or this area is too much to do. And I'm really not an expert. I don't know how to identify anything. Hey, if you could identify one invasive and you target that one invasive, you take it off your land, it made a difference. If you plant only one monarch, one milkweed on your property, you've made an impact. So don't worry about analyzing too much. So try to avoid paralysis by analysis. The other one to avoid, though, is extinction by instinct. And this one is a pitfall that a lot of people fall into. Their neighbor has a truck. They borrow the truck. They go down to the local nursery and they buy whatever's on sale. And it's green, it looks nice. And they just plop it in. And I remember as a kid, that's what I did when I planted, when I didn't know anything about it, invasives and how valuable native plants were. And once you learn that you don't want to go in and just blindly buy plants. You want to carry that 97 invasive plant list. Avoid those. Don't buy any of the 97 invasives. Even though burning bush is not banned, it's on the list. It's one of the 97. Connecticut hasn't banned it. New Hampshire has. Connecticut hasn't banned it. I couldn't consciously plant a burning bush. I'd plant, I'd rather plant high bush blueberry. Anyway, extinction by instinct, avoid that. So if you avoid these two pitfalls, take some of the suggestions that we talked about today, I think hopefully you can make a better habitat for wildlife. And that was 54 minutes, a little longer than I thought. I hope it's okay.
We have a couple of questions for you, Peter, before
Yep, go ahead.
Mary Pelletier has a couple things about questions on specific plants.
Sure.
And one is looking at red mulberry. Is that a native?
Okay, so red mulberry is listed as native to Connecticut. It's actually a species of special concern. It's not very common. So the red mulberry, the Morus rubra, there is an exotic Asiatic one that's a hybrid that you want to avoid. But there is red mulberry, the Morus rubra, is native to Connecticut. It's actually very uncommon. It's listed as special concern. But the white one is definitely more invasive or more aggressive than it's not on the invasive species, I don't think. It might be, I'm not sure the white one is. But the purple one that's a hybrid, the one that people plant that's pendulant and then it escapes. If you put only one in your yard and you buy the real Morus rubra, the real native one, Morus rubra, very valuable plant.
Okay. So if you can get the rubra,
Morus rubra. Right.
Otherwise, go to another native species.
Yeah, for summer foods, I would go with shadbush. What else for summer? Any of the rubuses, the black raspberry,
Okay.
other early producers. Trying to think. Shadbush, blackberry, strawberry.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the earlier berries.
Okay. And on that same line, there's a question about the milkweed. And
Yes.
tuberosa is a great plant for monarchs and incubates purple milkweed world.
Okay, so there's 3 Asclepiuses that are pretty commonly used. I think there's actually 5 native ones, but the three real I didn't put all of them in my talk for time,
Yeah.
but I could provide a handout for you, Sue. If you could email it out to them, I'll send you an email PDF of a handout that it'll talk about it'll have all the plants I talked about today.
Okay.
But the Asclepius tuberosa, the orange butterfly weed, the milkweed that's orange,
Yeah.
that one is a dry site. Dry. The common milkweed tolerates a variety of sites. but mostly well drained. The swamp milkweed or the red milkweed, Asclepias incarnata, that one is for wet sites. So if you have a wet area, I would go with the swamp milkweed. But swamp milkweed is a floodplain plant, so it'll tolerate drought as well as wet. So the one that you got to be careful with is tuberosa, the orange butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. That one likes really super dry. If it's not super dry, they get moldy and mildew. They get a powdery mildew that kills them. Okay.
Okay, and then okay, so it's basically the selection of the milkweed is based on the type of soil
Yes.
and habitat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Common milkweed, most variety, moderately well drained, common milkweed can grow. It's kind of bulletproof. It can go anywhere,
Yeah.
not in wet, but it'll tolerate a lot of, dry. It'll grow in the crack of a sidewalk, inside of a building. It'll grow in a field. So a variety of soils.
And will it support monarchs?
So how it supports monarchs?
Yeah.
It's a larval food. So monarchs.
No, excuse me, not how, but all of those varieties are going to be food sources for monarchs?
Yeah, Asclepias, any Asclepias species, Asclepias.
Yes.
So all of them are Asclepias genuses. They all are the larval foods, yes.
Okay, so that was the primary question, I think, was looking.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't hear the whole, I gotta pay attention to the question better.
So Mary Pelletier, does that answer your question?
Yes, I also wonder, where do you buy your plants, or do you collect seeds?
So that's a great question. The question everybody probably heard is, where do we get our plants? So when I first started working for Deep, it was very scarce. I tried to do I had to do 20 gardens once, native butterfly and hummingbird gardens, and there were 20 native species that I could get consistently to order for 20 gardens. Imagine that. Now, there's a lot of people, a lot of firms growing native plants. For Connecticut, the one that my favorite spot, and I'm not, I don't want to play any favoritism or anything, but I personally, for my own land, have bought a lot from Earth Tones Nursery and over there in Woodbury, just because they're entirely native. But you could get New England plants out of Massachusetts. Ernst Seed Company out of Pennsylvania makes a lot of seed availability. There's other nurseries. There's more and more nurseries, bigger nurseries like Pride's Corner, and the other one over there in Newtown escapes me. A lot of nurseries are carrying more and more native plants, and you should ask your nurseries, ask for the native plants.
Right.
I used to have a list that I would update, and I haven't updated it in a while, availability list, but there's a lot of native plants now on the market compared to the old days.
Yes, and if you bring the invasive species list with you, that helps avoid getting the wrong ones.
You're right. Very good, Sue. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. Planter's Choice is
Planter's Choice. That was it. Yeah.
In Fairfield.
That guy, Daryl, the owner, I actually heard recently that they're doing a lot of work with local native, like eco, from just like the way Earth Tones is doing, to collect seed right from the local environment.
Yeah.
I have collected seed myself, as I told you, from my own property. I've also collected seed from the shoreline to try to get salt tolerant plants that evolved in the salt zones, because we're trying to restore Charles Island. So there if you could find local seed and you learn how to, I met a lady today from Ridgefield. They Wild Seed, the name of their group. They're collecting locally and actually making the seed available to their local land trusts and things right from that area. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of movement in native plant collection, seed collection and availability.
Okay. Well, I like to thank everybody. I think we might have some weather starting to move into parts of our site. And Mary Pelletier also added the New England Wildflower Society.
Yes, yes. Thank
a
you.
very, very lovely native plant source
Thank you.
as well.
Thank you.
And you can definitely contact any of those people to get resources. The biggest thing is try and stay away from ordering online.
Yeah.
You just don't know where their resources are coming from. They might be located in Rhode Island, but buying out of California. So that's the hard part. So nice to meet your people. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and email Peter or myself, and we will try and get you those answers as soon as possible. Okay, and hopefully you'll have success without losing power today as the weather starts to move in. So thank you very much all, and we'll see you on future webinars.
Sue, you going to stay on for a minute?
I am.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I am.
Take care, everybody.